Hello, Mom. Good evening. I am Karen Jimbo, and this is the Group 2 presentation. So today we will be discussing about the anatomy and physiology of muscles. So the coverage of this topic will be the main function of the muscles, the microscopic anatomy of muscles, the nerve stimulus to muscles, naming of skeletal muscles, and the last one is the body movement of muscles. So there are four main functions of muscles. Number one is producing movement. Muscles attach to bones or internal organs, and blood cells are responsible for movement. Number two is maintaining posture, such as sitting and standing, is maintained as a result of muscle contraction. The skeletal muscles are continually making fine adjustments that hold the body in stationary position. Number three is stabilizing joint, may be defined as the state of a joint remaining or promptly returning to a proper alignment through an equalization of forces. The last one is generate heat, is byproduct of muscles activity and also called ATP hydrolysis. Essentially, it is the release of energy in the form of heat and abandoning the molecule of ATP breaks. So the muscular system is divided into three main types of muscles. These are the skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscle, and the smooth muscle. And each of these types can be moved by one of two ways, either voluntary or involuntary. So skeletal muscle. This muscle attached to the bone skeleton and provide the skeleton with the ability to move. And this muscle is voluntary. It's because they're controlled by the will of an individual. The person can take decision on the movement of the muscles. So the picture showed as the anatomy of the skeletal muscle. So as you can see, there is bone, the tendon, epimysium, endomysium, fascicle, the muscle fibers, the blood vessels, and the perimysium. Let's proceed to the tendon. Tendon is fibrous connective tissue that attaches muscle to bone. And the epimysium, the outermost layer of the tissue surrounding the entire muscle. And the next is endomysium, the innermost layer surrounding individual muscle fibers. And the next is fascicle, is a bundle of skeletal muscle fibers surrounded by perimysium, a type of connective tissue. Next is muscle fibers. Muscle fibers are organized into groups called fascicles. So the next is the blood vessels. Blood vessels are closely intertwined with skeletal muscle tissues lying between the fascicles or bundles of muscle fibers. Then the last one is the perimysium, the middle layer surrounding bundles of the muscle fibers. So that's all for the skeletal muscle. So let's proceed to the cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, these muscles form the walls of the heart and contract to circulate the blood. And these muscles is involuntary muscle because they are not controlled by our will. And these are found in our heart and are the only muscles which work throughout the life without getting tired and fatigued. The last types of muscles are smooth muscles. So these muscles found in organs or organ system such as the digestive or the respiratory system. And this muscle is involuntary because it has no sarcomere and therefore no striation or band or stripes.
Microscopic anatomy of skeletal muscle. Cells are multinuclei. Nuclei are just beneath the sarcolemma plasma membrane. Sarcolemma, specialized plasma membrane. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, specialized smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Myofibril, bundles of myofilaments. Myofibrils are aligned to give distinct bands, I band or light band, A bands or dark band. Sarcomer, contractile unit of a muscle fiber. Organization of the sarcomer. Taint filaments or myosin filaments, composed of the protein myosin, has ATPase enzymes. Organization of the sarcomer. Taint filaments, actin filaments, composed of the protein actin and regulatory proteins. Myosin filaments have heads, extensions, or growth bridges. Myosin and actin overlap somewhat. At race, there is a bird zone that lacks actin filaments, the H zone. Sarcoplasmic reticulum for storage of calcium. Irritability, ability to receive or respond to a stimulus. Contractility, ability to shorten when an adequate stimulus is received.
I am Queen Arbella Edibo of Group 2 and I'm here to discuss the nerve stimulus of muscles in anatomy and physiology of muscles. Here are the types of muscle fiber stimulation. First is the motor neurons. Motor neurons are specialized nerve cells that carry action potentials to skeletal muscles and stimulate to contract. It is also the cell in the brain and spinal cord that allow us to move, speak, breathe, and swallow. Second is the motor unit. Motor unit is a group of muscle fibers that motor neuron stimulates. It is consists of a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers innervates. Third is the neuromuscular junction or the synapse. It is where the neuron and muscle fibers meet. It is consists of several enlarged axon terminals or the presynaptic terminal resting in indentation of muscle fibers sarcolemma or the postsynaptic membrane. Each muscle fiber is in contact with a branch of motor neuron axon from the brain or spinal cord. Motor neurons carry electrical signals called action potentials, which cause action potential in the muscle fiber, followed by muscle contraction. Last is the synaptic vesicle, which is found in the region close to the presynaptic terminal that contains the neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which stimulates or inhibits postsynaptic cells. Here are the functions of neuromuscular junction. First, when an action potential reaches the presynaptic terminal of a motor neuron, it causes gated calcium ions channel in the cell membrane of the axon to open. As a result, calcium ions diffuses into axon terminal. Second, once inside the cell, the calcium ions causes the contents of a few synaptic vesicles to be secreted by exocytosis from the presynaptic terminal into the synaptic cleft. Third, acetylcholine molecules are released from the synaptic vesicles. Fourth, the acetylcholine molecules then diffuse across the cleft and bind to ligand-gated sodium ions channels in the sarcolemma, causing them to open. Fifth, sodium ions then diffuse into the muscle fiber, causing depolarization. In skeletal muscle, each action potential in the motor neuron causes a depolarization in the muscle fiber that exceeds threshold. This will produce an action potential in the muscle fiber. 6. Acetylcholine then unbinds from the gated sodium ion channels, which then close. 7. The enzyme acetylcholinesterase rapidly breaks down acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft into acetic acid and choline. Acetylcholinesterase keeps acetylcholine from accumulating within the synaptic cleft, where it would act as constant stimulus at the motor end plate, producing continuous contraction in the muscle fiber. 8 is motor neurons actively reabsorb choline molecules in the axon terminal. The choline molecules then combine with the acetic acid produced within the neuron to produce acetylcholine. Last is recycling choline molecules requires less energy and is more rapid than continuously synthesizing new acetylcholine molecules. Then acetylcholine molecules are then taken up by the synaptic vesicles. Acetylcholine is a chemical messenger or neurotransmitter that plays an important role in brain and muscle function. Next is acetylcholinesterase. It is secreted by the muscle and remains attached to it by collagen. It is also to terminate neuronal transmission. It causes cramps, muscular weakness, paralysis, and blurry vision. Next is the neurotransmitter, which is the endogenous chemicals that allow neurons to communicate with each other throughout the body. It is important in boosting and balancing signals in the brain and for keeping the brain functioning.
So now we are on to our next part, which is naming of skeletal muscles. Have you ever wondered what is the origin of the name of our muscles and where it came from or derived from? Firstly, they considered naming our muscles based on the direction of muscle fibers, which directed to like rectus or straight and oblique or slanted. Second is the relative sizes of muscles, like maximus muscle or the largest muscle, and the minimus or the smallest. Third is, of course, the location of the muscles. So a little trivia and fact, many muscles are named after to the bone that are attached or near to the specific muscles, like for example, our temporalis. This is where the temporal bone located. Next is their number of regions. That includes our bicep, tricep, and quadriceps. So these muscles are named after 2, 3, or 4 regions of heads.
Then, down to the location of the muscle origin and insertion, like the sternum, which is located and inserted to the sternum. Then the cleido is inserted on the clavicle, and the mastoid, which is inserted to the mastoid process. Move on to the shape of muscles. Like our deltoid, muscle is shaped triangularly. Lastly is the action of muscles, like if it has the ability to flex and or extend a bone. So for the next slide is the head and neck muscles. Frontalis is responsible for elevating the eyebrows. Our orbicularis is a muscle located in the eyelids. The zygomaticus is a muscle of a human body. It extends from each zygomatic arc, like our cheekbone, to the corners of our mouth. The buccinator is a thin quadrilateral muscles occupying the interval between the maxilla and the mandible at the side of the face. The orbicularis oris is a complex of circular muscles that surrounds the orifice of the mouth. The platysma is a superficial muscles found in the neck. The cranial aponeurosis provides the attachment site for the occipitofrontalis muscle. Our temporalis muscle is a thin, fan-shaped muscle situated within the temporal fossa of the skull. Occipitalis is to move the scalp towards the posterior of the skull. The masseter is one of the muscles of mastication. The sternocleidomastoid is the rotation of the head to the opposite side or obliquely rotate the head. The trapezius stabilize and move the scapula. So for the next slide is the trunk muscle. That includes the clavicle, or the technical term for collarbone. The sternum is a T-shaped vertical bone that forms the anterior portion of the chest wall centrally. The pectoralis major is the superiormost and largest muscle of anterior chest wall. Now the bicep brachii is a large, thick muscle on the ventral portion of the upper arm. Our brachialis muscle is an important muscle that involves in the flexion on the forearm located at the anterior compartment of the upper arm. Our brachioradialis is a falciform muscle located in the lateral part of the posterior forearm. So for the last slide of my topic, includes the rectus abdominis that makes up the top layer of your abdominal muscles, commonly referred to as your six-pack. The transversus abdominis is the deepest layer of abdominal muscle. Our internal oblique muscle found at the lateral side of the abdomen, while our external oblique muscle is one of the outermost abdominal muscle, extending from the lower half of the ribs around and down to the pelvis. Lastly is the aponeurosis. It is a connective tissue found on the surface of pennate muscles.
Muscle of pelvis, hip, and thigh. Tensor fascia latae produce the extension and the lateral rotation of the leg on the knee joint. Pectineus is a flat quadrangular muscle situated in the upper portion of the thigh. Adductor pubis is a flat triangular muscle that is found in the inner thigh. Sartorius is a thin, long, superficial muscle in the anterior compartment of the thigh. Next is the rectus femoris. It's a part of the quadriceps group. It is book of muscle located in the superior, anterior, middle compartment of the thigh. Vastus medialis, one of the four muscles that make up the quadriceps group of muscles. Vastus lateralis, the largest and most powerful part of the quadriceps femoris of a muscle in the thigh. Muscle of lower leg. Gastrocnemius muscle of the calf of the leg, which flexes the knee and foot. Soleus is a powerful lower leg muscle which is situated deep to the gastrocnemius muscle. Peroneus longus is an important muscle in your lower leg. Peroneus brevis is the shorter of the two muscles that make up the lateral compartment of the leg. Next is the flexor adductorum longus, is a thin muscle that belongs to the deep posterior muscles of the leg. Adductor hallucis belongs to the superficial layer of the plantar foot muscle.
Hello everyone, I am Kim Hadlan from FC1 BSN A11. So now we're going to discuss muscle and body movements. So what is muscles and movement? The muscular system is composed of specialized cells called muscle fibers. Their predominant function is contractibility. Muscles attach to bones or internal organs and blood vessels. They are also responsible for movement, and all movement in the body is the result of muscle contraction. So we have here the types of muscle movements, which are the adduction, abduction, flexion, extension, and repeat. So we have here the example of adduction and abduction in the given picture. So adduction, the movement of a limb or other part toward the midline of the body or toward another part, like this, example of adduction. While abduction is moving a body part away from the body. Flexion. Flexion describes a bending movement that decreases the angle between a segment and its proximal segment, while the extension is the opposite of flexion. It describes a strengthening movement that increases the angle between body parts. So we have here the examples of extension and flexion. And lastly, rotation. Rotation involves move a body part around an axis, like this picture given. So now let's proceed to the body movements. So there are general anatomical terms that can be used to describe most movements the body makes. Most terms have a clear opposite and so are treated in pairs. So these pairs include circumduction. There's no opposite of circumduction. Elevation and depression, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, medial, lateral, dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, pronation and spination, inversion and eversion, protrusion or protraction, and retrusion or retraction, and lastly the opposition and deposition. Next, the circumduction. There's no opposite of circumduction, so here is the circumduction example. Circumduction refers to a conical movement of a body part, such as a ball and socket joint or the eye. Circumduction is a combination of flexion, extension, adduction, and abduction. Elevation and depression. The terms elevation and depression refer to a movement above and below the horizontal. Elevation refers to movement in a superior direction, while depression refers to movement in inferior direction, the opposite of elevation. As you can see in the picture, the elevation refers to a movement in superior direction, and the depression refers to a movement in inferior direction. Internal or medial rotation and external or lateral rotation. Rotation of body parts is referred to as internal or external, referring to rotation towards or away from the center of the body. Internal rotation or medial rotation refers to rotation towards the axis of the body. And external rotation or lateral rotation refers to rotation away from the center of the body, like this example picture below. So next, dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So dorsiflexion and plantar flexion refer to extension or flexion of the foot at the ankle. These terms refer to flexion in direction of the back of the foot. As you can see in the dorsiflexion, he used the back of his foot, while the plantar is the tip of the foot. Next, pronation and supination. Prone is a person laying face down on a surface, while supine is a person laying face up on a surface. But we have here the example of a hand. Supination here in the example picture is the palm facing up, and pronation is the palm facing down. Inversion and eversion. Inversion and eversion refer to movements that tilt the sole of the foot away from or towards the midline of the body. Eversion is the movement of the sole away from the medium and the movement of the median. Here's the example of inversion and eversion. Protrusion or protraction, and retrusion or retraction. So protrusion and retrusion are sometimes used to describe the anterior and posterior movement of the jaw. Protraction and retraction refer to an interior or posterior movement, such as of the arm of the arm. So in this given picture, we have the jaw. So protraction, as you can see, the protraction is describe the posterior and anterior and posterior of the jaw, while the retraction is then also the anterior and posterior. So lastly, opposition and preposition. So opposition refers to the movement that involves grasping of the thumb and fingers, while preposition refers to restoring an object to its normal condition, like this given example picture. So I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead.
So, to sum up our report, the clinical relevance of anatomy and physiology of muscles is that enables humans to move and perform daily activities. They also play an essential role in respiratory mechanism and help in maintaining posture and balance. They also protect the vital organs of the body. The clinical relevance also of physiology of the muscle plays an important role, which can guide the professionals to do their jobs properly and avoid mistakes. This has been the Group 2, and we hope that you learned something from us and enjoyed our presentation. Goodbye and have a good day.